This is the Berman Method podcast featuring Dr. Jake Berman and physician assistant Jenny Berman. We are here to treat problems and not symptoms. Disclaimer, this podcast is for entertainment purposes only and not to treat anyone or to give medical advice. If you are interested in any information that we are giving and would like to use this for yourself, we recommend that you contact your primary care physician or reach out to us and ask us questions about yourself specifically. Enjoy.
Here we go, baby, the Berman Method podcast, where Jake does an amazing intro every Monday morning.
Happy Monday. Welcome back to the Berman Method podcast.
What do we focus on here, Jenny?
Treating problems and not symptoms.
What does that even mean?
Do you want it in your words or my words?
I want it in words that a fifth grader can understand.
We are going to figure out what is causing your problem. We're not just going to treat your symptoms. So we're not just going to give you a medication to help with your high cholesterol values or your back pain or your knee pain or your IBS, irritable bowel, loose stool symptoms that you're having. We're not just going to give you a medication to treat those symptoms. We are actually going to dive deep into your body and figure out what's causing the actual problem.
Is that going to hurt when you dive deep into my body?
Deep into your body. No, it doesn't hurt.
Sounds painful.
Not painful. I mean, I can't guarantee that nothing is painful that you guys do.
What?
Sometimes you hurt me when you work on me.
Yeah, but that's because we're spouses. You can't treat family.
But it's always worth it because it's treating the problem and not the symptom. So going against needless medications, going against needless surgeries, really treating as holistically and naturally as possible, but for longevity.
A specific example of treating the problem, not the symptom, is knee pain. Knee pain is the easiest one to understand because the knee joint is simply a hinge joint, just like a hinge on your door. Your door opens and it closes. That's it. There's really no other movement that a hinge makes. The door opens and then the door closes. It is very similar to the knee joint. I mean, there is tiny bit of rotational, torsional motion that occurs, but the vast majority of it is it straightens and it bends. And then when your knee hurts, everybody wants to think that, oh, my knee is the problem or my knee is bad. Let's go get an x-ray of my knee. Let's get an MRI of my knee. Do I have a torn meniscus? Do I have bone on bone? Do I have osteoarthritis? And you most likely do if you're over the age of 40.
But is that actually causing the pain?
No.
So what you're seeing is they will get an x-ray or they'll go get an MRI and it will probably show that there is some breakdown of the cartilage in the knee joint. There is a minor tear of the medial meniscus. There is some arthritis within the knee, but that's not actually causing the problem. That's not what's causing the pain.
Correct. And they've done tons and tons of studies over the past 20 years that look at people who are asymptomatic, people that do not have any pain at all. And over the age of 40, at least 60% across the board have something that shows up on an x-ray or an MRI when they don't have pain, meaning osteoarthritis, degeneration, meniscal tears, fraying, whatever it is, it shows up, but they don't have pain. So we've talked about this time and time and time again, but I want to come back to the analogy that I wrote about actually in my first book, Treating Problems and Not Symptoms, ironically, was the title of it. The chapter where I was talking about knee pain, and I referenced the door on a Starbucks. Everybody can relate to the front door of a Starbucks. And you can imagine how many times a day does that door open and close?
I can imagine, actually. That's a big number.
Guesstimate. 11 billion?
Yeah, that's a good number. I like that number.
Yeah, probably somewhere around 11 billion times a day that door opens and closes. And you know what a Starbucks door looks like. It's a big, heavy metal framed door with some really thick glass on it. So that door weighs a few hundred pounds at least. I can't imagine that door doesn't weigh anything less than 300 pounds. Can't imagine.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Okay.
So then it's got these hinges that attach the door to the wall, essentially.
Right.
Right? The door frame attaches it to the wall. And those hinges have to be really strong and durable. Now, you can imagine that scenario. And now let's take that same exact scenario and translate it to a 100-year-old house. So up in the New England area, there's a ton of houses that are early 1900s and quite a few of them that have original parts. And some of the doors that you go into in these houses, when you open the door, you hear a squeak or some type of squeaking noise, right?
Right.
And your first thought usually is, oh man, these hinges are 100 years old. Let's replace the hinges so they don't squeak anymore. So you can do that. You can replace those 100-year-old hinges with brand new hinges that are state-of-the-art, just like those hinges on the Starbucks door. And it's most likely that the squeak will go away temporarily.
Got it. That's the key. Temporarily.
Yes. The reason why the hinges were squeaking in the first place was because the wood, the frame, the door frame, the wall that the hinges were attached to is starting to go bad.
So that's the actual problem, and the hinges were the symptom.
Yes, because it didn't have a good foundation or a good attachment point to the wall. There was increased stress or torsion on the hinge joint itself, and that's why it was squeaking.
Got it. This is all making sense.
Yes. So it's the same exact thing in your body. Your knee is the hinge, and the thing that it attaches to is your hip.
Right.
So let's say your hip is synonymous with the door frame. If your hip is not strong enough, you don't have all the glute muscles firing on all cylinders, and you don't have enough stability in your hip joint, then there's increased stress, increased torsion on your knee joint or the hinges.
Right. So the gluteus maximus and medius, your buttocks muscles, essentially, need to be strong enough to stabilize the hip to take the stress off of the knee. That is what you're saying.
Yeah, and it's not just glute max, glute medius, it's also glute minimus, it's all the rotators. There's a ton of things that go on in that area. Let's just call it your butt area.
Your buttocks.
Yeah, not your buttocks, but your butt area, because your buttocks is talking about your glute med or your glute max.
Okay.
Let's just talk about your butt area. Put your hands on your ass, that general area. There's about 10 to 15 muscles that we're talking about. Let's just call it that area though.
Okay.
When that area ain't doing its job, then there's increased stresses that get transferred down the chain. The next joint down the chain is your knee. So it starts hurting.
Because of the increased stress across the knee joint.
Yes.
Got it.
So just for fun, it's ironic that we're talking about this right now because I was doing some continuing education last night. It's time for our license renewal this year. And I came across these stats last night that are a bit outdated. However, I can only imagine that they're amplified exponentially to current standards because it's only been going up. Nothing has been going down. And here's some stats for you. In the United States, we account for over 50% of total joint replacements of the entire world.
Wow. So one country
accounts for over 50 total joint replacements. Now we're talking about knees, hips, shoulders, elbows, everything, right? So total joint replacements, not surgeries, not fusions, not back fusions, total joint replacements. So hips, knees, shoulders, elbows, ankles, toes, big toe joints.
Yeah.
The United States accounts for over 50% of total joint replacements of the entire world. Now, this is where it gets really interesting because I can't even imagine what the number is now. In 2005, revenue from hip replacements alone exceeded $2 billion. That means that these hip surgeons and all of the people associated with them were responsible for generating over $2 billion in hip replacements alone. And this is in 2005. We're talking 20 years ago.
Right.
What is that number today? I should have looked it up, but I didn't. Next part of that stat. So in 2005, the US generated $2 billion in hip replacements. Europe generated $1.4 billion. Now, here's where it gets really interesting, is knee replacements generated $2.4 billion in the US and only $774 million in Europe. So this is what's interesting. This is where we have to talk about all of the things that go into knee pain and degenerating knee joints. Because what's the biggest difference? This is probably not a fair question to ask. I'm just going to ask it to you anyways. What's the biggest difference in the lifestyle of Americans versus Europeans?
Europeans walk a lot more.
That's the biggest thing. That is by far the biggest thing, is Europeans walk everywhere versus Americans don't walk anywhere unless you're in this household.
Or in the city. Yeah.
Okay, so let's do this again. In the US, we generated $2 billion in hip replacements, and Europe did $1.4 billion in hip replacements. In the US, we did $2.4 billion in knee replacements, but in Europe, they only did $774 million in knee replacements.
So what you're telling me is because they walk more and are generally more active, less sedentary, their butt muscles are stronger, taking more stress off the knee. They're doing more walking, but having less knee replacements. So it's not the activity that's causing the knee pain.
Correct. I mean, this is all my theory. That none of this is proven. However, it's highly suggestive that more physical activity, less obesity, right? Because you're walking everywhere, you're not fat.
Correct.
Right? So if you don't have excessive weight on your knees and you're using them effectively all the time, every day, you're less likely to wear them out.
Right. So it's not, again, not the aging process that's causing the arthritis. It's the lifestyle factor. So the food intake, the inflammatory foods, that's something else we could talk about when it comes to joint pain. Is in Europe, there's a lot less issues with gluten sensitivities, dairy sensitivities, because there's less genetically modified organisms, GMOs, over in that area of the world. So that could be causing less inflammation through the joint as well. But also kind of coming back full circle to what you're talking about is just the fact that we are generally more active. It's increasing the lubrication of the joints, decreasing the cartilage breakdown of the joints. It's keeping weight off of us, which is putting less stress through the joints. So generally, joints are healthier.
Yes. Let's agree to all of those things. Now, I got one last statistic that I want to talk about, because I hate just rambling about statistics, especially when you're listening to a podcast, because it's like, if I can't see it in front of me, these are just numbers that I'm hearing and it doesn't make sense. But this is an easy one to understand. Here in America, the amount of knee replacements that occur every single year has been on the rise since the 80s. There hasn't been a single year where we did not do more knee replacements than the previous year since the 80s. Yet it is getting, I don't want to say exponentially because it's not exponential. However, it's getting significantly greater, significantly more are happening every year nowadays than 10 years ago. And one of the biggest reasons is because younger people are starting to have knee replacements much sooner, much earlier, versus 10 or 20 years ago. The thought process, or the surgeons would say, put it off for as long as you possibly can, because one, it's a surgery, and there could be negative outcomes. And number two, you don't want to outlive your knee replacement. So that was the general thought process 10, 15, 20 years ago. Nowadays, it's not, because it's so routine, because these knee replacements and hip replacements are so routine. Surgeons are literally doing 15 of them a day. Like just bang them out one after another. 10 to 15 knee replacements a day. Sometimes they're doing bilateral knee replacements. Right. I'll never forget it. When I did my acute care internship here in Naples in NCH, one of the surgeons at NCH was one of the first people to regularly do bilateral knee replacements at the same time. Mm-hmm. It's like, what? Are you kidding me? How the heck is this patient going to recover? But they did. Right. So it's such a routine thing that occurs nowadays that, your knee's bothering you. Let's go ahead and chop it off, because you're going to need a knee replacement sooner or later anyways. And the prostheses are getting better and better. So you're less likely to outlive it if you just modify your activity level. Because this was one last stat. They showed that there's a correlation with how much you use a joint replacement to how fast it degenerates. Big surprise, right? Mm-hmm. So if you have metal and plastic and you use it more often, it's more likely to break down faster than if you don't use it more often.
Right.
But anyways, coming back full circle, because it's so routine and so quote unquote easy to get a knee replacement nowadays, younger people are having them done much sooner and not trying to push it off.
I just had this conversation last week with one of my clients who initially came to us for weight loss because he was planning a hip replacement, and he's lost 28 pounds now, and really not long, less than 3 months, but he's lost about 28 pounds and is really doing well, feeling great. He's now exercising, getting on his bike and doing some strength training. And I said, so how's your hip? And he was like, it's doing great. And I was like, well, that's awesome. Are you still planning to have the hip replacement on October 16th? And he said, yes. And I said, well, why? If your hip is doing so great and the weight loss has really helped and the less inflammatory foods has really helped, your lab values are a lot better, you're a lot healthier, you're in the gym, why do we need to replace this hip right now? Why can't we wait? And he was like, well, the doctor thinks I'm going to, it's bone on bone. I'm going to need it replaced anyways. So while I'm, doing great and healthy and in a good place, we're going to get it done. And I said, but why? We've treated it the right way. And that bone on bone obviously is not causing you any pain because you're having zero pain and you're exercising. And if you do a hip replacement now and we live another 20 years, you're probably going to have another one. So why would you do it now? But I didn't win the battle. Surgeon beat me.
It's so funny, and it drives me nuts how frequently surgeons say, you're going to need one at some point. So let's just go ahead and put it on the books. Mm. I hate that. I mean, it is a countless amount of times that I've experienced working with a patient in my PT office who was told that. The surgeon told me that I'm going to need a knee replacement anyways. I don't know why I'm here. This is just a waste of my time, but I figured I'd give it a shot because my wife was just nagging me and I just wanted to please her. Fast forward 2 years later, they've been pain-free for 18 months, have no restrictions at all, are more active today than they were 5 years ago. And there's no glimmer of anything suggesting that they're going to need a knee replacement. Now, I'm not trying to say that we cured their bone on bone, but what I am trying to say is they don't have a pain response anymore.
Or the bone on bone was not triggering their pain initially.
Exactly. Same thing. You're saying tomato, I'm saying potato. So the only reason why anybody ever gets a joint replacement is because, I should say 99% of the time that people get joint replacements is because the pain is just too much. There is a small percentage of people who get joint replacements, not because of the pain, but because of the function. They can't function anymore.
Sure.
However, the overwhelming majority get joint replacements because the pain is too much. The problem is that the majority of the pain is not coming from the joint itself.
Right.
I mean, we're talking about majorities here, not the minority where, yeah, your bone or your joint is screwed. It is collapsed. There's no motion here at all. This joint just looks horrendous. Chop it off and get a new one. I'm talking about the overwhelming majority where, yeah, it's bone on bone, it's arthritic, whatever. But the majority of the pain response isn't coming from it to begin with. It's coming from the surrounding soft tissues.
Right. And it's hard for people to know that when they go to a physician or a surgeon's office because they're not evaluated. They just get the scans or the pictures, but there's no actual hands-on evaluation to look at the range of motion, to look at the muscles above the joint firing appropriately, to look at the soft tissue. And that's where having a good physical therapist would come in to be able to fully evaluate that.
Exactly. So let's wrap things up with this one thing. I can say with 100% confidence and honesty that I have never worked with a single patient who had knee pain, who had 5 out of 5 glute strength.
Right. I can see that. So their butt muscles as a whole were very strong and still had knee pain. That has never happened. ever experienced that in my whole entire career. And if I did, we're not talking about asymptomatic or insidious. We're talking about traumatic. So somebody that's younger and it's a sports injury or something else where it didn't just happen on its own. It's not just a quote unquote old knee. I've never, ever worked with anybody that had knee pain who had 5 out of 5. That's how we grade it, is a 5 out of 5 is perfect strength. 4 out of 5 is not quite perfect, and so on and so forth. 0 out of 5 is paralyzed. There's no strength at all. Never worked with anybody that had knee pain and on that same side had 5 out of 5 glute strength. Just doesn't exist in my world, at least. Maybe in somebody else's world, but not in mine. Right.
So until you have perfect strength in the surrounding supporting areas, you cannot tell me that the knee joint itself is causing the pain. You can't do it.
Right. And this is going to go, we talk about different joints all the time on this podcast, but this is going to go for other joints as well. When it comes to hip pain, what is your back doing? What is your pelvis doing? What are your glutes still doing when it comes to hip pain? In my own case right now, postpartum, having some core activation issues and some issues, just above my C-section scar. I've had 2 C-sections now. And a lot of that is actually coming from the mechanics of my feet and my scapular strength, meaning my scapulas are in your back, kind of like the shoulder blade areas. So the strength around my shoulder blades and the mechanics of my feet are actually affecting my core, which seems crazy to think about. Something behind me and at the bottom of me is affecting my midsection. So it just proves to you that where the pain is, it ain't. Right?
Is that a quote from Jake?
Yeah.
Where it is, it ain't.
Where you're feeling it is oftentimes not where the problem is in lying. So you need to have an evaluation by a physical therapist, for females, a pelvic floor therapist, if that's what you need, but someone who's actually going to put their hands on you and really identify where is the muscle weakness that we are experiencing.
Love it. So let's wrap things up with this. Where are you currently experiencing pain that you have written off as, oh, I just have a bad shoulder. Oh, I just have a bad elbow. Oh, I just have a bad ankle. That's a big one. I've got a weak ankle, so it's just bad. Where are you writing something off because you think that it's bad? An x-ray said that it's bad. Your doctor said that you're going to need a replacement. I know that there's a significant portion of the people listening to this that have something that they've written off. And then I want you to think, what if that's not true? That's one of the most important things about our philosophy is it's hard for our philosophies to work with you if you are not willing to accept that everything that you've been told is not true. Maybe not everything, but at least a good portion of it. If you're not willing to accept that the majority of what you've been told is not true, then it's probably not going to work with us. And you should keep going down the cookie cutter route and keep contributing to these massive amounts of money that's spent on the corporate medical system every year and stop listening to me rant.
Yep. Just coming in with an open mind and being able to try something different. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. So when that's not working, let's look at it from a different perspective. Let's try something new. But you have to trust us.
Love it. Good. So don't forget that we've got a couple of spots left for our fall and spring seminars. So if you want myself or Jenny or both of us to come talk to your group, your country club, your gym, whatever it is, let us know now and we will get it booked. Email me, Dr. Berman at bermanpt.com, or email Jenny at bermanwellness.com.
JENNI
at bermanwellness.com, and we'll get those things scheduled for this fall and this spring. We're also still actively recruiting and hiring PTs, PTAs, ATs, personal trainers,
administrative assistants.
So essentially every role. If you know anybody who's got the personality and the work ethic, even if they are not currently doing something in the healthcare world, doesn't matter. We're looking for talent right now. So we're recruiting talent. You could be in the restaurant industry or the construction industry.
I was going to say cabinetry. So
anything. It doesn't really matter. If you've got the talent and the ability to learn and willingness to give it your all, let's do this thing.
That's right. And one other side note, I am leaving this week to go to Chicago to earn an infertility certification. So we've been treating a lot of clients with infertility issues. We've been through it ourselves. We've really taken the functional medicine standpoint on fertility and improving fertility. And so I'm really excited about this opportunity to now be certified.
I love it. Yeah. What's that one diagnosis that drove me up the frickin' wall?
Oh, secondary infertility?
No, kind of, but there was another word for it. Unexplained infertility.
Unexplained, yeah.
There was another.
Unexplained secondary infertility.
Is that what it was?
That was my official diagnosis by fertility doctor. Unexplained secondary infertility.
And you weren't the only one that got it. We actually have a really good friend that had the same exact diagnosis. Fast forward, she now has how many kids?
3.
And you now have how many kids?
2.
So we've got 5 kids that occurred from ladies that were diagnosed with unexplained infertility. It's
and my other diagnosis was secondary hypothalamic amenorrhea.
It's like what
does that mean?
You're getting MRIs of your brain to see if you have brain cancer, and it was crazy, absolutely crazy. But anyways, you're going through the certification so that we can try to change it, because you're not alone. There's a ton of women out there right now that have been given this diagnosis, and it's not like you're going to go out there and cure them all.
Oh, yeah, definitely not. It's still certainly a process, still very, very individualized, still not guaranteed by any means, but to be able to look at it and approach it from a different perspective, again, hopefully using less medications than you have to, or optimizing your body so you can use the IVF medications and actually have a successful pregnancy, a successful IVF transfer in full-term pregnancy, versus many women that we've been working with now have had several IVF transfers in the past and were unsuccessful, and then finally had a successful one once they've been working with us and decreasing internal inflammation, optimizing gut health. So it's a different perspective, whether you still need the medications or not, but certainly, something that we are really passionate about and have been working more with. So this is an exciting opportunity.
Yes. And the last thing that I'll say on this topic is we lived it. So I experienced it. The amount of enormous pressure that's put on the female when contraception can occur. I mean, just an absolute enormous amount of pressure that's put on these ladies. Jenny in particular, where it's like, we're living this. And prior to this, I've heard about people say that they really struggle getting pregnant, and man, it just wasn't fun having sex because we had to have sex. And at that time, I was like, what do you mean it wasn't fun? Really? It was work? But after going through it, it's like, holy shit, it takes every part of the enjoyment factor out of it because of how much stress there is on it. And the thing that I want everybody to know, or especially the ladies that are listening to this, is it's time. I know you don't want to hear that, but there's no magic pill. You can't just go and, all right, now we're pregnant. I mean, you've got to give your body time to heal the right way. And I'm not talking weeks or months. It could easily be 2, 3, 4 years.
Yeah.
I mean, how long did it take us?
Yeah,
to do it the right way.
First time around, we from the day we started really putting effort into it until we had Stella was just over 4 years. So
yeah, and we're not saying that it has to be that way, because had we known then what we know now, maybe it would only have been 2 years.
Right, and I do believe that. I think with the first 2 years of what we went through was really a waste compared to it. Nothing's a waste, but compared to what the knowledge that we had the last 2 years and the amount of healing that occurred in the last 2 years, and then the successes that we had. So
internal healing, gut healing.
Yeah.
Good. So I think that was a good wrap up. Make sure you share this episode with somebody else, subscribe, comment on these things, review these podcasts. Let us know what you think. Send us your questions. We've been getting some good questions from the listeners. So Dr. Berman at BermanPT.com or Jenny at BermanWellness.com. Send us some questions and we'll talk about it on one of the next podcasts.
Awesome. Have a great week. Happy Monday.
Ciao for now.
Ciao for now. Thank you for subscribing on your social media and podcast platforms to the Berman Method. Dr. Jake Berman with Berman Physical Therapy and Jenny Berman, Physician Assistant with Berman Health and Wellness. You can find more information on our website, www.bermanpt.com for physical therapy, bermanpt.com/wellness for the health and wellness. You can also find us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and on your podcast platform. So be sure to follow us, like us, subscribe to us. And if you would like any further information, definitely visit our website and reach out to us. You may also find our free reports on the websites as well, where you can download this free information for yourself. Have a great day.